Though I've talked about this topic even 6 years ago, this video has more conclusive images and a control test. This video is made in 4K. People say I go to Cambridge in Color diffraction calculator. I put in 45 megapixels. At f8 I have no diffraction, but when I put f11 it says yes diffraction for the D850. However, if I put in 24 megapixels, which is the D750, at f11, no diffraction. So what is the difference? We're gonna see it in this video, the actual difference in images. The same page has an image sample, and it shows what diffraction does from aperture to aperture. But people are wondering how much does it apply in real life. So here's the test. Two bodies were used, D750, D850, same lens, the 125 Voigtlander Apo-Lanthar, all files in base ISO, all in camera enhancements off, and focusing was reconfirmed with a loop. So one would ask, why did I put the chart so far away? Because these charts were made for a circle of confusion of about 30 microns, which is 10 to 12 megapixels.
And they said the design targets were done or were defined in a very simple way. They took a postcard, a black and white postcard, where you can see a black and white picture, and they counted the dots. How many dots do we need to get a perfect postcard image? And they came to the conclusion that 1 million dots are necessary to get a good print on a postcard, or a good picture on a postcard. And with this, they defined the circle of confusion, the allowable circle of confusion, or the minimum size the aberration should be, and this they defined 30 microns.
So if our chart is supposed to represent a 4x6 to 6x9, then the whole image is representing a medium to large size print. In images and general techniques in this video, please also consider that these lines that indicate on your lens the depth of field are for the same reason completely useless nowadays. They were made for a circle of confusion of 30 microns, and they indicate only acceptable focus for small prints, not sharp focus for medium to large prints, and definitely not for modern 20, 30, 40 megapixel cameras. And I've talked about this in detail about a year ago. Obviously, I cannot compare them straight out of camera because the magnification factor will be different to see the small details. The D750 image is smaller. So the obvious step is to upscale the D750 image to 45 megapixels, no AI, no noise reduction, no tricks, straight upscaling. So we go over here, image size, and over here we choose preserve details, no noise reduction, resample in pixels. And we're going to choose the pixel size of the D850, which is 82, 56, and the other one is adjusting by itself as well, and that's what we're going to do, a simple upscaling. And then save all the files from both cameras as TIFs. At 2.5, the D850 file is sharper than the upscaled D750 file, but consider the magnification factor 300%. The same is happening at f4. The D750 file is slightly improved, but still the D850 is sharper. And a lot of people are going to argue, why 300%? That's too extreme. Introducing other factors in the equation, you should be comparing at 100%. Well, at 100, it's hard to see any difference, really. So you should give some credit to the D750 is my point. because the D750 file has been both upscaled and magnified after that at 300%. At 5.6, the D850 is still ahead. It is slightly sharper. And now we finally start hearing it. Okay, guys, wake up now. Because at f8, the D850 is still a better file than the upscaled and magnified D750, but it is not as good as it was at 5.6. Though one would say the difference is so tiny that it can only be slightly seen at 300% magnification. I'm comparing D850 files now, side by side, 5.6 versus f8. But I can see some really slight degradation in the f8 file. And look at f11. The D750 remains pretty much as it was, same blurriness. It's the D850 file that starts going down. And we finally hit it. We finally hit it. At f16, the upscaled and 300% magnified D750 file has the same sharpness as the D850 at f16. That's diffraction. Severe diffraction at f16. Same files, same sharpness throughout. And at f22, what you expected. The upscaled D750 file at f22 is sharper than the D850 file at f22 because of the severe diffraction in the D850. In practice, we have to separate between long and wide lens. The wide has a substantial depth of field. Large landscapes, much easier, versus close-up pictures. That's where the problem is. There are two distances involved: how far you are from the focus point and how far the focus point is from the background. This test over here is very revealing. This is an image at 1.4, but I focused over here. You see? Look at the background, the distant background, very blurry, right? So then I took another picture at 1.4 as well, but this time I focused over here. So let's compare them. In the first image I focused over here, and in the second image I focused over here on that little corner. The initial focus point is about the same. Strange, right? Look at the roof behind. Well, the roof is obviously sharp here because I focused at the same distance, right? That was my focus point. Look at the distant background. And this is the same 55mm lens at 1.4. I focused over here. Now, if I had focused on this thing, then the background would have been a little sharper too. And this is also 55mm at 2.8. Now, it all depends on the size of your print as well, because at this size, well, it looks sharp enough. I'm talking about the second object over here. But if you start printing very large, then it's going to show the difference. And this is the scenario where your point of focus is very close to you, and at f11, as you can see, f11, the background is going to be blurry. So these two distances are important, especially the distance between yourself and the focus point. Now let's go back to diffraction. So here's a large landscape, and we're focusing on the barn. With a standard 50mm lens f8 to f11, we know that, and it's always smart to take 3 or 4 pictures at different apertures to choose the best at the end. If you're using wide angle 24-28, I would say that 5.6 is usually enough. f8 is maybe an overkill, depending also on the distance between you and the barn. But what if someone now says, you know, I was not that close, I was further away, too many tourists in the area. So I used a 135 lens, which has a shallow depth of field. So maybe I should close down to f16 with focus on the barn to cover as much as I can from the background. So let's check out what happens at f16 on a part of the image on which we are focused. The size of this square, which will be about the size of this square, right? In the middle. Same camera, same lens, different aperture. You see that? And as far as the pieces of wood on the barn, which depend a lot on texture, this is your texture at f8, this is at f16. And if we move to the areas of perfect focus, because on that thing I'm half an inch off, this is your comparison. And you see a huge difference, right? Now, as I said, it always depends on the size of the print as well. If you don't print it, but it's just an electronic copy, and a large electronic copy, it's going to show immediately because people are going to magnify it on their screens. At any rate, landscapes are easy, the large ones. The close-ups are the problem. You're really close to the focus point, the background is going to be very blurry. One would say, I'm gonna step down to f16, f22, I don't care about diffraction. Okay, f11 then. 35mm f11, and I cannot move further away. It was a really tight space. The front is sharp, the background is a little blurry. At f11. Let's stop down. f13. The front is nice, the background blurry. I stopped down, nothing happened. Very little happened, I would say, so I stopped down at f14. And the background is still blurry. And now I have another problem. My shutter speed is down, and it was a little windy that day. Not very windy, just a little bit. So I'm getting now the effects of a little wind with a slow shutter speed. So the solution is not to step down the aperture, but to move further away when you're in close-ups. In this case, I could not. Or use a wider lens. If I could take even half a step away and use a 28 instead of a 35, I wouldn't have to even go more than f11 and get much better sharpness in the background. So this video was just a recap and a reminder. The good video is coming in a couple of weeks. Thanks a lot, bye.